Right now, if the temperature outside dropped to negative 34 degrees Celsius, most modern humans would die in under an hour. No jacket, no house, no heater, you'd be gone. Frozen solid before sunrise. But here's the thing. For over 300,000 years, your ancestors lived through winters like that. Some of them faced entire ice ages where the cold never really ended. And they didn't have heaters. They didn't have thermal jackets. They didn't even have proper houses for most of that time. So how did they survive? The answer is stranger, smarter, and darker than anything you were taught in school. Let's rewind about 20,000 years to the peak of the last ice age. Half of Europe was buried under ice sheets almost 2 miles thick. Winter temperatures in some regions dropped to negative 40 or even negative 50 degrees Celsius. There was no farming, there were no cities, there were just small groups of humans scattered across a frozen world trying not to die, and most of them didn't. Archaeologists have found ancient burial sites where entire families died within days of each other, buried together in the same shallow grave. Winter was the great killer. If you weren't ready, you were dead. But some groups didn't just survive. They thrived. And the way they did it starts with one thing that most people completely underestimate: fire. We've all seen movies where cavemen huddle around a fire. But what those movies don't show you is that keeping a fire alive in negative 30-degree wind, in a world with no matches and no lighters, was one of the hardest survival skills in human history. Ancient people didn't start a new fire every night. That would have killed them. Instead, they carried fire. They kept embers glowing inside hollowed-out horns, wrapped in dried moss, buried in ash. Some groups had a designated firekeeper, a person whose only job was to make sure the ember never died. If the fire went out on a cold night, someone was going to die by morning. Think about that for a second. There were humans whose entire life purpose was to protect a single burning coal, and that's just the beginning. Because fire alone wasn't enough. Not at negative 34. You need shelter. You need clothing. And ancient humans figured out both. Thousands of years before agriculture. Thousands of years before writing. Let's talk about clothing first. Because this is where things get really impressive. By around 30,000 years ago, humans had invented the bone needle. That doesn't sound like much, but a needle with an eye, a hole you can thread a piece of animal sinew through, is one of the most important tools in human survival history. Without it, you can't sew fitted clothing. And without fitted clothing, you can't survive a real Ice Age winter. Archaeologists have found bone needles from Siberia dating back 45,000 years. In a cave in Denisova, they even found what appears to be the world's oldest sewing needle. This was made by a species related to us, a species that lived through winters we couldn't survive one night of. With needles, ancient humans made multi-layered clothing. Inner layers of soft fur pressed against the skin to trap body heat. Outer layers of tougher hide to block wind. Hoods lined with wolverine fur, which naturally repels frost. Boots stuffed with dried grass for insulation. Mittens sewn to the sleeves so they couldn't be dropped in the snow. Modern Arctic gear designers still study these ancient designs today. Because a hunter-gatherer 20,000 years ago was in many ways better dressed for the cold than most people wearing puffer jackets in the city right now. But even the best clothing wasn't enough on the coldest nights. So ancient humans built shelters, and they built them out of the strangest material you can imagine. Mammoth bones. In modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists discovered a structure from around 25,000 years ago made entirely of mammoth bones and tusks. Massive femurs used as support pillars. Skulls stacked like bricks. Tusks curved to form the roof. The whole thing covered in hides. Inside, a small hearth for cooking. They didn't have wood, not enough trees. So they used what the frozen earth gave them. The bones of animals bigger than elephants, sitting inside one of those mammoth bone huts with a fire burning, wrapped in fur. The temperature could climb 40 or 50 degrees warmer than the wind outside. It was survivable. It was livable. And here's what nobody talks about. These weren't caves. They weren't emergency shelters. They were homes. Multiple generations lived in them. Children were born in them. Elders died in them. This was normal life. Now let's talk about food. Because you can't survive negative 34-degree cold on an empty stomach. Your body burns calories just to keep your organs alive. Modern humans in cold climates need around 5,000 calories a day just to maintain body weight in extreme winter. That's more than double what most of us eat now. So what did ancient humans eat when the ground was frozen and there were no plants? Meat. A lot of meat. And fat, especially fat. Ancient hunter-gatherers in cold regions ate diets that were up to 80% animal fat. They cracked open bones to eat the marrow inside. They ate the fatty organs, heart, liver, brain, that most modern people throw away. They rendered fat into a soft paste and ate spoonfuls of it straight, like butter. Fat was calories, fat was warmth, fat was survival, and they didn't waste anything. Not a single scrap of meat, not a single piece of hide, not a single tendon or bone. Every part of an animal had a use, as food, as clothing, as tools, as building material. In a world that would kill you for a moment of carelessness, waste was death. Some groups even stored food for winter. In the frozen ground, they dug pits and buried entire slaughtered animals, letting the cold act as a freezer. Archaeologists have found these ancient food storage sites in Russia and Alaska, filled with the perfectly preserved bones of mammoth, bison, and reindeer buried tens of thousands of years ago. They knew about refrigeration long before we invented it. They just used the earth. Now here's a question you might not have thought about. What about the children? Modern babies can't survive a single night at -34 degrees. So how did ancient humans keep their infants alive? The answer is heartbreaking and beautiful. They carried them. Skin-to-skin contact, the same thing modern doctors now recommend for premature babies, was how ancient mothers kept infants alive. Baby was pressed against the mother's chest inside her fur clothing, sharing her body heat, feeding constantly. It's why human breasts, unlike other primates, produce milk on demand for years. It's why babies instinctively calm down when held close. It's an Ice Age adaptation. It's still inside you. Elders were kept close to the fire. Children were bundled together. Whole tribes slept in one shared space, bodies close, breath warming the air. Alone, you froze. Together, you lived. This is why humans became one of the most social species on Earth. Not because we chose to, because loneliness in an ice age was a death sentence. Now let's zoom out. Because everything I just described, the fire keepers, the bone needles, the mammoth bone huts, the fat diets, the shared body heat, none of this appeared overnight. This was 300,000 years of trial and error. Every generation learned from the one before. Every mistake was written in death. Every solution was passed down through stories, through demonstrations, through winter after winter after winter. Modern DNA studies show that people whose ancestors lived through the Ice Age still carry cold adaptation genes today. Slightly thicker body fat distribution, slightly more efficient blood flow to the extremities, slightly stronger cold shock response. If your ancestors survived those winters, you literally carry pieces of their survival inside you right now. And here's what we've forgotten. We live in a world where you can walk into a heated room, take off your jacket, and never think about survival for a single second. But everything you take for granted, the walls around you, the clothes on your body, the food in your kitchen, every single one of those things exists because someone, 300,000 years ago, figured out how to not freeze to death. You are here because they didn't die. You are the descendant of the toughest, smartest, most resourceful humans who ever lived. People who looked at -34 degrees and said, "Not tonight." They didn't have books. They didn't have schools. They didn't have technology. All they had was fire, fur, family, and 300,000 years of pure human ingenuity. And it was enough.